Good afternoon. You're listening to My Conscious Dad on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS. I'm your host, Jasmine Urbina, here in the studio with my dad, Alex Urbina. And this week, we're going to be talking about the power of vulnerability. So last week, we kind of went over what it means to be vulnerable and, your certain distinction. Why don't you go ahead and go over that again?
I think when it comes to the word vulnerability, most people, they cringe when they think about that because when they were younger, growing up, vulnerability to them meant that it's a sign of weakness, that you're bringing your wall down and you're allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. It kind of has a negative connotation to it. It's not a strong quality. And there are, a number of people that are walking around in this earth that have realized or come to realize that vulnerability is very powerful. And it's just a new relationship with the word vulnerability. They've given it a new meaning. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But for me, vulnerability, when I realized how powerful it was probably in my early 20s when I was asked to share my experience of the training that I had, this profound awakening. And it was at a guest event. It was at a night where people were there to see what the training was about. And they asked, people in the audience who wants to share their experience. And I remember standing up and sharing my experience. And right in the middle of sharing that experience, I started to tear up, and I started to recollect the amazing experience that I had in that training room. And the tears started coming down, and I got choked up. And I remember sharing how I saw a glimpse of what was possible for me to be a better father. And I saw what was possible for me to be a better husband and better son and a better brother, and just, take my life to a whole nother level. And I was, just in awe of what I had experienced of myself. And as I was sharing that, I, broke down a little bit. And coming from this 20-year-old macho, cool, tough guy, it was quite an experience. I had to really surrender and let go all of the negative connotations that I had, created around the word vulnerability. And I had to really let go of being macho in that moment. And I'll never forget this. I walked outside before the guest event was over. And I remember when it was over, a bunch of people were walking outside. And I had about 3 or 4 men, like real tough guys, come over to me and just thank me for sharing that, including a couple women. And they just say, you know what, because of your sharing tonight, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to sign up. And I remember that feeling for the first time, realizing that I got to shatter a new belief about the word vulnerability. And I realized that it is, as long as you're not overdoing it, if you're the type of person that's really sensitive and crying on everything, it kind of loses its power a little bit. But I think at the right time and the right moment, when you allow yourself to, bring the walls down and let people see the real you, the authentic you, the part of you that's struggling or feeling pain or scared or whatever is coming up for you, when you let people see that, it's magnificent. It's magical. And I think people don't realize that they can choose to see it like that as well.
Yeah, last week you kind of had said something that really stuck with me was, when we're kind of talking about the definition of vulnerability, because normally it's taken as weakness, or you're susceptible to being wounded or something like that. But you kind of had said that it's a place that you go to emotionally or spiritually that people can just see or they can feel. And I've never heard it broken down like that. I've only known that I could never explain it. And I really like that you had said it that way, because it's very, very difficult, very challenging for me to explain to people what it means to be vulnerable without that negative connotation.
I think that, if I really broke it down to another level, I would call it a higher level of trust. Like, as you and I sit here, I have to really dig down deep and give you everything and trust you wholeheartedly that, you have my best interest in hand. And so when I bring my walls down and allow myself to feel what I'm feeling and share that with you, that you're not going to take that and turn it against me, or you're not going to take that and harm me, or you're going to, take a stab at me, or whatever it is that my fears are. I have to totally surrender those fears and really trust you at a deep level. And that trust gives me permission to share in a way that it's meaningful, that it's real, rather than this predetermined script that I have in my mind and that I'm going to say. So I don't go into relationships already thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm present and in the moment, and whatever comes up for me in that moment, I give myself permission to feel that, and I trust that you will, take that and take it in and experience it with care, and that you'll be gentle with me. And I think that's really another way to break down the distinction of vulnerability.
I also think what's also very powerful about vulnerability is giving other people the permission to also be vulnerable when I'm being vulnerable.
Well, that's just leading by example. Like I've learned, through the years of doing so many interviews with people and sitting down and having deep, meaningful conversations, I've learned that I am a mirror for other people. So if I learn or give myself permission to be vulnerable first in a conversation, it's pretty amazing. You'll see the transformation in the other person. They'll all of a sudden start to open up more, and they'll share more. And the sharing and the opening becomes a little more deeper, and it's a little bit more meaningful and powerful. But you can't expect that other people to go there first. You got to give yourself permission to be that mirror for them so that they can see that. And a lot of times, people, they'll ask me, they're like, how come I'm always crying around you? Every time we sit down and we talk, I start crying. And I mean, I'm not going to go around and tell them, well, I'm practicing being vulnerable. It's just an art form that I've developed, and give myself permission to go there so that you can go there. I'm not vulnerable in a conversation so that, I'm doing it now and being it now in this moment. If I'm with you because something's heavy on your mind, I want you to share with me in a way that you can let it go and you can express it so that you can get off it, so that you can heal yourself. But if I got walls up and I'm guarded and I'm not present in the moment and just being authentic, you're not going to share with me as deep as I want you to or as I need you to. So it's imperative for me as a coach to be vulnerable and to practice that, and to maybe start it off or say something that really kind of gets the other person to trust me at that level. Yeah,
I think a lot of people are vulnerable and they don't even really know it.
That's right.
I have a lot of friends that I don't have that feeling where I want to tell them everything and what's going on with me, because I know that they're very focused on themselves and what's going on with them. But I have those other friends that I feel like they genuinely do care about me. They don't even have to say anything. We'll just be sitting there and I already want to say something to them, or I want to share an experience with them. And they have no idea that they're even being vulnerable. They're just being.
Absolutely. And, there's benefits for you choosing to practice your vulnerability. I think that, it's funny because I took some notes on this topic a little bit yesterday, and the person that really nails it down for me more than anybody out in the world is a woman by the name of Brene Brown. She does a powerful TED Talk about the power of vulnerability. And in her speech, she shares that, we're here as human beings on this world to really have deep, meaningful human connections. That's really what's important. If you really look at, and it's true from my perspective, if you really look at all the people that are highly successful in their life, when they're really struggling, and you ask them the question, like, what do you want? At the end of the day, what people really want is to be deeply connected with the people they say they love the most. They want to master their relationships. They want to be able to share and then have you share with them. That's what we're yearning for in our relationships, in our marriages. We want to be heard. We want to be acknowledged. We want to be recognized. We need to know that we exist. So in order to do that, you need to have someone else in a relationship. You need to be in a relationship with somebody. Because you don't know you exist if you're the only person. If you're isolated and you don't have relationships, you don't know yourself to be anything. That's why we need relationships. We need to have people to be able to share ourselves. So if I'm sitting here with you and I'm sharing with you whatever's coming up for me, and you're that mirror for me, then I'm getting to know who I am. I'm realizing that I'm a caring, compassionate person. I'm getting to see myself through your reflection. And so I think that, when it comes down to human connection, we're all yearning for that. But we don't realize that we sabotage that because we have walls up and we're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. We're not allowing ourselves to be seen fully by the other person. We're guarded as human beings, and I don't think the unconscious realize how guarded we really are.
I actually saw that TED Talk with Brene Brown, and she was kind of saying that in her 10 years of studying vulnerability, she found that there were two types of people. There were people who saw shame in vulnerability, and there were wholehearted people, I think
That's
is
right.
what she called
That's
them.
right.
And
You have a great memory.
yeah, this is a really old TED Talk.
Yeah, it is. But it's a classic because, for higher level conscious, she did the research and she's a great storyteller. So the research with telling the story it was magical. But yeah, it does come down to people that are wholehearted. She did a study on people that are wholeheartedly, that are authentic. And she breaks down the distinction of them. Like, what are the common denominators with people that are authentic? And I actually took a couple notes. She says that, people who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe that they're worthy of love and belonging. And that goes back to the belief system. We have these self-limiting beliefs that get in the way of us experiencing the full joys of what life can give you. So if you grew up in a home where, you're always trying to prove yourself to your parents, and your parents are never giving you acknowledgement, or they're always looking at what you didn't do rather than acknowledging you for what you did, then you might have a low self-esteem and a sense of lack of worthiness. And if you have a lack of worthiness, then how can you ever belong or have enough love? Because you sabotage it by having this belief that you're not worthy of it. It's almost like you're contradicting yourself. So that's why as adults or young adults, the more that we can be aware of that we have these limiting beliefs, we can start to shift those and start creating some affirmations to start loving ourselves, to start coming to the conclusion and getting clarity that, you know what, no, I do matter. I do deserve that. Some of the most powerful breakthroughs, and the thing that really inspires me when I sit with my clients, is when they tell me, when they get their own clarity, they go, you know what, Alex, damn it, I do deserve this. And I just get my eyes get all bug-eyed, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, yes, you do. I'm glad you see that. And then I'll say, did you hear yourself say that? That's such a glorious moment when people get clear that they are worthy and they do deserve love and happiness and joy and or to live the life of their dreams. Of course you deserve it. But the trick is that you have to choose it. You got to decide that. You got to self-proclaim it. You got to have the audacity to just step up and go, no, I get to. Rather than sifting through all the beliefs in your past and your failures and all that stuff and coming to the conclusion that, well, maybe I don't, or maybe, I wasn't supposed to have. No, don't believe in all that. Get yourself clear, get yourself a mentor, a coach, or hang around positive people and look at how they see the world. And that's what I love about Renee Brown, is that she did that research and she studied hundreds, if not thousands of people, and heard the stories and sifted through and found the magical ingredients in vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think it took her 20 years.
I think it was 8 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, of the study. But then it was funny because she tells a story about now she realized that as she was learning that, she's like, wow, I realized that I have my own dysfunctions when it comes to vulnerability, that she sought out a therapist to help her become vulnerable. And she says in a 2-year process, the therapist helped her work through some of the stuff that she needed to be able to experience the full power of what vulnerability and the gifts that it gives you.
I think especially for, doctors, people with PhDs, these researchers, it's really hard for them to access, or it's a challenge for them to access that sort of vulnerability because they need it in science. They need it on paper to say why vulnerability is important.
Well, that was one of the challenges. She said that as a scientist, that I forgot what the quote was, but the quote said something like, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And she was trying to measure vulnerability, and there's certain things you can't measure, certain things that science cannot confirm, like love or God or anything that's magical and powerful, the essence, the beingness. How do you measure beingness? And some of the work that I do, it's like, how do you measure that? Like or getting testimonials from some of my clients. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't know how to say it in a way like, I know that they're giving me the feedback and the accolades because there's a certain look they have, or they get humble and they get vulnerable and they're like, thank you. But they don't know how to articulate. It's not measurable. It's not tangible. Other than all of a sudden they notice that, their husbands are showing up different, or their kids are now getting better grades, or they're helping out around the house. They're able to see those kinds of results that they share, but they can't explain what's magically happening in their being, in their power, and and their insight and their confidence and their clarity. You don't realize how powerful clarity is until you all of a sudden start getting clarity. Because prior to you getting clarity, you just think that the way you see it is just the way it is. But once you start opening up possibilities for people and they start having these aha moments, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that I've been thinking this one way my whole 30 years of living.
You know, what's really great about clarity is sometimes I can tell somebody 1,000 times, you're great. You can do this. You can go get that job. I don't know why you're not trying. I could tell them 1,000 times and they're just like, oh yeah. And then, a couple of days later, or months or years or whatever, they're like, why didn't I do this before? I'm like, are you serious? I've been telling you this for years.
Well, I get that too. I get, parents that will come to me and they'll, after a training or, maybe a week or two or whatever, and they'll say, you know what, since little Johnny took your training, he's now taking out the trash. He's speaking, from the responsible version. He's not blaming anymore. He's owning up. He's a different kid. And then they'll say, they'll say something like, what did you do in that training room that I haven't been doing? And, a lot of times my answer is that I haven't been saying anything or I didn't do anything that you aren't already doing. The problem is that your kids have you in a box, right? We'll call it parent deaf box. Because you're saying it, they automatically discredit it because you're the one that's been hammering them or you've been kind of not showing up in a way that's been empowering them and inspiring them. They don't see you as on their side to have them win. They see that you're against them. So it doesn't matter what kind of great wisdom you have, it ain't going to land. But all of a sudden, this guy that steps up in front of the room and starts talking about their greatness that they have no history or no experience from, all of a sudden they're hearing all these great things. And when they come home at night, they're like, Mom, guess what Alex said? And then they'll repeat it. And they're like, it's phenomenal, isn't it? And then the parent's like, Tommy, I've been saying that for the last 10 years and you haven't been listening. So a lot of times we get parent deaf and it's not until we decide that that's our truth. Because you can say something to me like, give me some advice, and it'll land maybe at a 10%, right? And unconsciously, it's kind of like it's just your opinion. But if you're good enough to ask me questions, and then I actually say it out of my own mouth, and then I hear myself say it, it becomes my truth. And there's a distinction between your opinion and my truth. If you can get people to come to their own conclusions of how amazing they are, how powerful they are, then they own it. And that's why earlier I was telling you, I love when my clients make their declarations to me that I am powerful, I do deserve this. And I'm like, yes, you do. So I'm there just really to affirm that. But they don't realize that it took me a little while to ask them these questions and go down the road for them to come to that conclusion. And that's the power of having a coach. But, a lot of what I do helps me to get to those levels is me coming into the relationship, being vulnerable and having my wall down so that they can trust me. And there's some credibility there too, right? You trust people that don't have an agenda or it's apparent that their egos is in check and that they're just being authentic and real in the moment for you.
Right. Like I said earlier, I have friends that just being around them, I know I don't want to open up to them because a lot of their attention is focused on themselves or whatever they're doing. And then there's other friends where I can feel that they're genuinely interested in me. They don't even have to say anything. I'm like, oh, you know what? I need to talk about this with someone. I think I'm going to go to this person.
Right.
And it's like how you said in the beginning, on a deeper level, it is about trust. And it's not necessarily about how long you've known the person or how you've built up the trust.
That's right.
I think it's a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to that because I get clients that call me just out of the blue and they'll sit down with me and you can tell they're guarded. And after 10 or 15 minutes, all of a sudden they're telling me their deepest, darkest secrets, or they're really just they're on a roll. And once they're on a roll, and I think it's more of the expressions on my face. It's this energy that's radiating from me. It's not like you can see it. It's just a feeling. It's more of a feeling that people get. It's like almost like their spirit is trusting your spirit, like we locked on. And we've identified that, hey, you're not a threat to me. You're not, I can trust you. And so I'm going to now open up and share. Look, when we come back from the break, I want to talk about examples. Like what are some of the examples of what it looks like to be vulnerable? And then I also want to talk about how people, how they deal with vulnerability and not wanting to go there.
Sounds great. Stay tuned for more of My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.